I never wanted a flashy life. A flashy life was never my thing, just something steady. I'm the kind of guy who gets by on routine: work, gym, microwave dinner, Netflix, sleep, maybe a few beers with friends on Fridays if I'm feeling wild. Boring, sure, but routine was my anchor, or at least it was. This thing, whatever it is, has taken that from me. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. Now I wish that's all it was. It started about a month ago. I was at my desk, the usual clutter surrounding me: cold coffee, snack crumbs, and an overdue bill peeking out from under my keyboard. I was halfway through answering an email when I noticed something odd in the corner of my monitor. It was barely noticeable, a faint smudge at first glance. I assumed it was just a smudge from my fingers and grabbed a tissue to wipe it off. But no matter how hard I rubbed, it didn't go away. If anything, it seemed sharper after I cleaned it. The blur seemed to sharpen, forming unsettling edges. I leaned in, squinting. It wasn't a crack, no damage to the glass. Maybe it was something inside the screen, a defect I hadn't noticed before. I muttered something about cheap electronics and went back to typing. I figured it didn't matter, a dead pixel or whatever. Except it wasn't a dead pixel. The next day I saw it again, only this time it wasn't just a blur. There was shape to it. A shape your mind instinctively rejects because it refuses to make sense. A faint outline, like someone was leaning into the frame but hadn't fully materialized. A suggestion of a curve where a head might be. The shadow of hollows where eyes could go. I cleaned the screen again, harder this time. Still nothing. The edges stayed sharp, the blur hovering there like it had sunk its claws into the corner of my vision. I forced a nervous chuckle, trying to convince myself it wasn't worth worrying about. "It's just a trick of the light," I said out loud, because saying it made it feel less real. Except it wasn't a trick of the light. It stayed there, growing bolder by the day. Every time I sat down to work, it felt like it was watching me. Don't ask me how I knew, I just did. It was as if the blur had a consciousness, dissecting me with its unseen gaze, waiting for me to do something, though I didn't know what. After a week, I started catching movement. Barely noticeable, like a flicker just at the edge of awareness. I'd glance at the screen, and for a fraction of a second it would shift, folding inward, then snapping back into place. I wanted to believe it was my imagination. Lack of sleep, eye strain, something logical. But no matter how much I rationalized, the reality of it clung to me. By the second week, it had escaped the confines of the monitor. It began to haunt every surface I glanced at. The microwave door, my phone screen when I turned it off, the bus window on my ride to the grocery store, indistinct yet ever-present, a shadow lingering just out of focus. I stopped looking at reflective surfaces altogether, draped every mirror in my apartment with whatever I could find, left my phone face down, unable to face its reflection. I even considered throwing the damn thing away. But how would I explain that to anyone? "Hey, my screen is haunted, so I'm going off the grid?" Yeah, right. But even with every mirror covered and every window avoided, I couldn't escape it. My monitor was inescapable. My work required me to stare at it for hours every day, and it was there, always in the corner, watching. I turned to writing, hoping to trap my fear in words and make it feel smaller. I opened a blank document one night and just started typing, describing everything I'd seen. The shifting blur, the eerie movements, the unrelenting reflections. My thoughts tumbled out in a frantic stream. But as I wrote, something changed. The blur in the corner of my monitor began to shift. Slowly at first, unnervingly, as though it were drawing breath. I froze, staring at it, but it didn't stop. Its form solidified, growing darker, its edges biting into the screen. Shards of glass reconstructing into something whole and monstrous. And then I saw it. The outline of a head, thin, elongated, impossibly unnatural, with hollows where its eyes should have been. The shape leaned forward as though pressing closer to the screen. My breath caught, fingers frozen above the keyboard. For a moment, I thought about running, grabbing my keys and bolting out the door without looking back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something about its gaze rooted me to the spot, like it knew I wasn't going anywhere. I don't know why, but I started typing again. Frantic, desperate, as if spilling my thoughts onto the page could hold it at bay. But the more I wrote, the clearer it became. I could see the faint outline of limbs now, long, spindly arms, hanging down to where its knees should have been, its head cocked, twitching unnaturally to one side as though it was trying to understand me. And then it moved. Not just in the screen's reflection, it was behind me. I didn't need to look to know it had crept closer. The sound gave it away, a noise that shouldn't exist, wood groaning as if alive, soaked with the sound of something splitting open. My stomach twisted as it grew louder, each step dragged and uneven, like it wasn't sure how legs were supposed to work. I typed faster, my hands shaking, words pouring onto the screen in a desperate attempt to drown it out. I glanced at the monitor, and my chest slammed to a halt. It was inches away now, its head twisted at an impossible angle. The hollow pits where eyes should have been locked on me. My ribs felt frozen in place. My vision smeared like I was underwater. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. And then the reflection blinked out like a candle snuffed by a gust. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling as the room sank into silence. The figure, was gone from the screen. Not farther back, not hiding in some shadowed corner. It wasn't there anymore. I didn't turn around. Every nerve in my body demanded I move, flee, but my brain clung to one fragile thought. If it's gone, then maybe it wasn't real. Yeah, that had to be it. I was tired, hallucinating. The monitor hissed softly, its pale glow spilling onto my hands. I stared at the screen, empty now except for static crawling over it, whispering and faint bursts of sound. My thoughts were scattered, shredded. But one fact pressed down on me like a weight. Even if I couldn't see it, I felt it. The air wrapped too tight around me, sharp and alive, like something curling closer. I swallowed, my throat dry and tight, and pushed back my chair. The legs scraped loud against the floor, the sound like a knife in the quiet. I froze mid-motion, straining to hear anything beyond my own shaky breath. Nothing. No steps, no creaking floorboards, just the monitor's hum, soft and steady. Ignoring every warning screaming in my head, I turned. The room was empty. Dim light pooled from the desk lamp, spilling over my cluttered bed and the heap of sheets shoved into the corner. The closet door was shut tight. No shadow shifted. No sign it had been there. I wanted to laugh at myself, but the sound wouldn't come. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned back toward the monitor. That's when I saw the static. The document I'd been typing was gone, replaced by a black and white storm buzzing against the screen. The static wasn't faint. It hissed and popped, pressing itself into my head like something alive. Confused, I shook the mouse. No change. I tried the keyboard, typing blindly. Alt-Tab, Control-Alt-Delete, but the static held. It wasn't supposed to happen. My computer wasn't that old. Static wasn't supposed to be possible. And then I heard it. At first it was subtle, whispers tangled under the hum of the interference. Words I couldn't make out, layered on top of each other. They pressed down on me, a weight that settled deep in my chest until they weren't whispers anymore. They were steps. A sickening scrape echoed behind me, wet and thick, like flesh tearing against something soaked. The sound dragged closer with each beat of my heart. I didn't turn around. The static flickered, flashes of darkness cutting through the screen. For a fraction of a second, I saw something else, slick, fractured edges glinting in the black. Then it was back to static. The steps stopped, hovering just out of reach. I shut my eyes, dragging in a breath that tasted like ash. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. My fingers moved on autopilot, fumbling to power off the monitor. The screen went black. For the briefest moment, the reflection of the room came into view, and there it was. Its face filled the glass. No blur, no distortion. Every grotesque detail burned into me. Skin clung to its skull like it had been painted on, cracking where it tried to move. The hollow pits of its eyes glistened like polished stone, and its mouth, God, its mouth, stretched open, wider and wider, the barbed shards inside gleaming like shattered mirrors. And then it made a sound. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't words, it was raw, metal tearing into metal, the scrape of something too sharp dragged across concrete. My head screamed with the sound, the pressure of it shaking every bone in my body. But somehow, beneath all of it, I understood. "Can you see me?" I opened my mouth to scream, but the sound wasn't mine. The static came alive again, the wail now layered with 1,000 voices, each crying out, each drenched in agony. It filled the room, slamming into the walls, into my head, into everything. Pain ripped through my chest as an invisible force threw me back against the chair. My head snapped to the side, and I saw it standing there. No reflection, no screen. It was real. It was here. It was moving toward me. I tried to move, to fight, but I couldn't. It felt like something heavy and alive was pressing into me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. The air reeked of blood and decay, heavy enough to choke on. It lunged, its fingers stabbing into my chest like meat hooks, ripping through skin and ribs like they weren't even there. I screamed, but the static devoured it, leaving only that endless grating roar. It pulled, and I tore. 3 days later, they found what was left of me. At least I think they did. I wasn't exactly there to see it. Not anymore. I can picture it, though. The building manager standing outside my door, the stench of rot seeping into the hallway. Maybe the neighbors complained about the noise, those faint, static-like cries that dragged on until the silence hit. Or maybe it was the smell that finally pushed someone to call. Either way, they came. And they found it. The remains, if they even qualified as a body, were torn to pieces. Blood had painted the walls in splintered streaks, dripping to the floor in dark, uneven trails. My limbs were thrown across the room like broken puppets, scattered in grotesque patterns. My torso slumped in the chair, spine bent so far back it almost folded in half, and my face, gone, obliterated into nothing. But the real horror wasn't the body, it was the writing. Every wall was coated in dark streaks, covering the room like some horrific wallpaper. At first, they thought it was blood, thick, tar-like streaks that dripped to the floor. But it was wrong. Too thick. Too alien. The words were gouged into every inch of the walls, brutal and unhurried. "Can you see me now?" Over and over again, the question repeated itself. Some letters trembled as though written by a shaking hand. Others were precise, unnervingly clean. The words wept something dark, pooling in thick trails that refused to dry. When they turned to the monitor, they found the final piece. The screen was broken, its glass shattered into shards so small they reflected nothing. But the static lingered, a flickering hiss, quiet but sharp enough to gnaw at your mind. And there, in the fractured reflection of the glass, they swore they saw something. It wasn't a face, not exactly, just a shape, sharp and angular, shifting too fast to focus on. It pulsed with every flicker of the static, the sound rising and falling like a distant heartbeat. The police never made sense of it. How could they? There was no weapon, no clear cause of death, just blood, static, and those words that seemed to burrow under your skin the longer you stared at them. The case went cold after that. They cleaned the apartment, painted over the walls, and threw out the monitor. The building manager swore no one would live there again, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Every prospective tenant backed out, describing a weight they couldn't explain, like the air itself was pushing them out. That should have been the end of it. Another unsolved mystery in a city full of them. But it wasn't. A month later, the first email arrived, sent from my old account, an address I hadn't touched in years. No subject, no body, just an attachment. A blank text file with a single line written inside. "Can you see me?" The recipient deleted it, of course. Who wouldn't? But the email kept coming. Different addresses, different formats. Sometimes it was a photo, a cracked monitor, an empty room, a vague shape in the corner of the screen. Other times it was just the question, repeated over and over until it filled the entire page. The recipients varied too, friends, colleagues, even strangers. But all of them said the same thing. After they opened it, their screens were never the same. The static started small, barely noticeable. But it grew, and with it, the certainty that something was watching. Now it's your turn. You've read this far, haven't you? You can feel it, can't you? The weight, the pressure just behind you, just out of sight. Whatever you do, don't look at your screen too long. And whatever you hear, whatever you feel, don't let it know you can see it.